Welcome, everyone, and good afternoon. My name is Steve Recchia, Vice President at ERS. On behalf of myself and ERS, I'd like to thank you for joining our webinar today, which is titled Cohort Default Rate Management, Finding the Right Tools to Bring Success. If this is not the webinar that you wanted to attend, probably now is a good time to jump off. But really excited about today's webinar. We've got some great speakers lined up, and they include Gene Olson from Northern Arizona University, David Glazerman with Temple University, and our very own Brandon Peterson from ERS. Before we get started, I do have a couple items regarding today's format, starting with our audio and video. If you have any issues, experience any problems, please contact the GoToWebinar support, and they should be able to assist you if you are having any problems. Additionally, if you have any questions at any point in time for any of the speakers, please use the chat feature that you see on the upper right-hand side of your screen, and one of the facilitators will present the question to the presenters. Also want to take a brief moment to mention that today marks the second webinar in a four-part webinar series for the year. Next webinar will be in September with the date and topic yet to be determined. So if you have any topic ideas and you'd like to email me, feel free to do so, and we'll take a look. Also, we'll be archiving this webinar on our website, www.ersinc.com. This webinar will be available probably as soon as tomorrow. You'll also find past webinars archived in our video library on our website. With that being said, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Denny DeSantis, formerly at the University of Pittsburgh. Mr. DeSantis, it's all yours.
Hey, thank you, Steve, and welcome out there in Cyberland. We're really excited to present this webinar to you. As Steve said, this is the second in a series of 4 webinars. Next one hopefully slotted at the end of September. And we're excited to have 3 very great, very knowledgeable speakers today. The first starting out is Gene Olson from Northern Arizona University, and then followed by David Glazerman, the Assistant VP and Bursar at Temple University, right in Philadelphia. And as our closer, Brandon Peterson, the Director of Operations at ERS. So before we actually get started, before I turn the virtual podium, so to speak, over to Gene, think about what you want to get out of this webinar today. And if you have a question or issue or concept or something that you want to leave with, please right now post it in the chat section of your screen, so that instead of waiting to the very, very end and maybe running out of time for questions, that hopefully we can look as we're presenting and deal with some of these concepts that you're really interested in. So I'm going to turn it over now to Gene. Gene?
Thanks, Denny. I have to be upfront with everybody. When David first asked me to participate in this, I told him, I'm not sure I'm the right person to be doing this, because quite frankly, our cohort is really not where I want it to be. And we discussed that a little bit, and probably a good portion of you out there also are having a lot of the same issues that I'm having, where it's your state economy that you're also having issues with. So if we could flip to the next slide, please. So Northern Arizona, I guess I would say we're kind of a mid-sized school, as you can see from the enrollment there, but we do have a pretty diverse campus. So the almost 19,000 students that we have on our main campus are basically your traditional students. At our distant learning sites, a lot of those are non-traditional students, the same with our online enrollment. And I don't have this on the slide because this is something new, but NAU is starting personalized learning for students, which is now going to be a whole new, different demographic for us. So it's a 6-month program that students are able to pay one price for and take as many competencies as they possibly can. So as you can see, we're dealing with, as many of you are, a huge different demographic. And the question is, you know, how do you reach those people? So next slide, please. So my first suggestion really is to start out on the front end of things. So are you setting those repayment expectations from the beginning? And, you know, every school is different. You know, smaller schools, larger schools. So, you know, I think what you really want to do is try to intervene, you know, while the borrower is still enrolled, you know, when they're in grace period, preparing to enter into that repayment, you know, and what type of information you have out on your website that you can point them to help them out. You know, can you generate emails to them, you know, when the loan disperses onto their account with a link to your website telling them to go look at the terms of those loans again? You know, or do you have, I guess, basically the makeup at your school that, you know, you don't have a lot of time to do front end? You know, are you waiting until they graduate? You know, I think that if you're doing that, you might be a little bit too late because obviously some of your borrowers are not graduating. So that brings us to identifying your at-risk students. So, you know, pay attention to your currently enrolled at-risk borrowers, which students are academically at risk, you know, on probation, suspended, for whatever reason withdrew from the university midterm and didn't complete their educational program. And, you know, maybe you're even able to identify by program which students might be struggling. You know, pay attention to those students that are 30 days late, 60 days late. Did they have receivables at school that they had problems paying while they were enrolled? Do you still have receivables for them? You know, these are pretty easy to identify and kind of an easier target group to take and start off. And if you try to reach out to these students early when they've missed a loan payment and before they have reached critical delinquency and are at risk of actually defaulting on their loans. Next slide, please. And then how do you communicate with these students? So when you reach out to the borrower, how are you doing that? You know, are you making telephone calls, letters, emails, call blasting, social networking site messages? So the key is to determine what outreach strategy best works for your students and for your staff. For example, I've worked at both a small private institution and a larger public institution. At the small private, we're able to do small group entrance and exit meetings with students, more one-on-one meetings. You know, the portfolio is smaller and easier for one person to give individual attention to those students. At the larger public, you know, we do more things online. Unfortunately, we can't give that one-to-one service that some institutions are able to do. And but I think it's helpful if you get out in front of them at the beginning of it. And one thing that has really worked well for us is we started doing call blasting, or what some people call automated calls, you know, and we're sending out a positive message to students, and we've gotten positive feedback from them on those messages. So you really need to figure out what communication works best for your demographic. Like I showed you for NAU, we've got a huge difference demographic, and so you might want to take and split those types of students up, your traditional from your non-traditional. And, one thing I would suggest is when you're sending out a text message, an email, or a letter, have your student workers read it, because if they get bored and they start glossing over on it and they're not retaining the information, the same thing is going to happen to your borrower. And, do try to stay away from those negative messages, because they just don't want the stress of dealing with it. So, what happens when those email bounce back to you, you get mail returns, that telephone number is no longer good, or they just quit returning your calls. So what are your resources? How can you get that information to contact the student? Because you have limited skip tracing resources, or in reality, limited time to be skip tracing. So, what information or what services does your loan servicer have available to help you with that? Another thing to check is check your main ERP system and see if that information is different from what is on the loan servicers, because a lot of times your registrar has updated your ERP system because they've sent out that diploma, they've sent out a transcript. There's reference contact information that you have for parents, grandparents, siblings, spouses. Another really good resource is your alumni department. Most of the time they know where their students are. You can get information off of NSLDS, such as cancellations due to disability. And do you have any of your colleges that keep track of your students, such as your health college? Typically they're keeping track of their nursing students. And, don't wait until a few months before the end of the year to pay attention to your cohort. Everybody has the big push towards the end to work with the cohort, and if you kind of chip away at it little by little as you go out throughout the year, it's not going to be so strenuous for you at the end of the year. And, start thinking about what type of reports that you can pull, and even take and pull in other people from within your campus, because one of the best ways to take and reduce things is like to work with your admissions and your registrar's office, financial aid, because you want to reduce the number of dropouts. How do you retain these students? What exactly are those issues that you need to help them address? And working to ensure borrowers can repay their loans. Do you have career counseling on campus? Can you help them find a job through that resource so that they can start paying back on their loans? And, sometimes it's a little difficult to get right down to, I guess, the analytics of it, but, if you can identify the characteristics of your high-risk borrowers and formulate default prevention strategies based on those findings. And the one that really is going to probably work well for your traditional students is interactive technology that teaches students about borrowing. And one term that I've been hearing a little bit more about lately is gamification. And that's really teaching them through a game. And, you know, they like to be challenged. They like to get to that next level. They like to beat the system, just like their Xboxes or Wii's or whatever it is that they're playing with. And, you know, some other things, you know, make sure that you contact those borrowers who drop out of school midterm and get them to go out and do their exits and help them as best you can answer those questions about, you know, their grace period, deferments, forbearances. You know, we all know about the consolidations and rehabilitations when they get into trouble, but you also want to, you know, let them know what their options are. For some of them, you know, trying to get them back in school so that they can finish their programs and perhaps be able to use those cancellation benefits of that Perkins loan. A couple of other things that, you know, sometimes have kind of fallen by the wayside with the technology that we have is actually having those borrowers who've applied for graduation complete those exits before they graduate, rather than, you know, making sure that they walk through and get their diploma, that they're doing that ahead of time, while, again, you still have contact with them. And going on to repaying the loan, you know, if you are able to give them basically an estimate of, you know, what their balance is, and I'll probably kind of date myself with this one a little bit, but you used to have to each semester sign for your disbursement. And we gave them at that point a total of what they had borrowed to date for that loan. If you have a way of getting them that information, that's helpful. I know a lot of times now you sign the master promissory note and it's over with, but you do, I think, need to try to find some way to stay in contact with these students so that, you know, they don't sign something at their freshman year and all of a sudden their senior year, where did this loan come from? Because they're not going to remember what they signed 4 years ago when they were so excited to come to school and, you know, basically start working on their careers. You know, and some of the things, too, that you need to remind them about is that, you know, even if they are dissatisfied with the school, dissatisfied with the program, these are loans that they do need to take and pay back. Just because they didn't like what the outcome was doesn't mean that they're exempt from repaying, like, unfortunately, some of them like to think they are. And, you know, they're also responsible for notifying the loan servicer as well as the school of any changes of name, address, telephone number, etc. And, you know, if you can get them to understand, you know, if it's at all possible, you know, when they're in grace period, start making small payments on that loan so they kind of get used to it, or suggest even, you know, on their smartphone, take and set that up on a monthly basis as a reminder. You know, I have to pay my Perkins loan. Here's the date I have to pay. This is how much I have to pay. You know, and that's a real easy way for them to take and remember to do that. The other thing I like to remind them of is that, you know, this is a revolving loan fund. So as they pay back that money, we get to loan it out to additional students. And with a lot of the students, that really kind of resonates with them too, that, you know, they're in their own kind of little way being able to help somebody else go to college. You know, the other things that you should also be reminding them of is, unfortunately, the consequences of failure to repay that loan. So, damaged credit rating, loss of the repayment schedule and deferment options, possible seizure of federal and state income tax refunds. They could end up with a judgment against them, referral to the collection agency. So they're liable for additional money and collection costs, attorney fees, garnishment of wages. So I guess, really just try to keep in touch with those borrowers as best you can. Don't wait until they get to graduation, because most of the time they're not going to even remember that they have a Perkins loan, and a lot of them really don't distinguish between their Perkins loan and your Stafford loans or any of the private loans that they have out there. They're pretty much willing to sign about anything just so that they can get into class. So with that, I will pass that on to David.
Hey, thanks, Jean. This is Denny DeSantis again. I just wanted to follow up that it's so interesting in almost anything we do. One of the important ingredients is the type and the method of communication that we use, and not just in our personal life but in our professional life as well. And technology has brought us some interesting and different ways of communicating as well. There's a lot more things like texting going on versus actually communicating via voice. But some technology has also brought some very interesting ideas like call blasting as well, which I think is really has a role in higher ed. So with that, let me turn the virtual podium over to David Glazerman from Temple.
Thanks, Denny. Good afternoon or good morning out on the West Coast, everyone. I'm going to take the next few minutes to talk to you a little bit about what we do at Temple University in terms of cohort default management. But some of you may be wondering, why are ZRS doing this webinar now? Because cohort default rate measures are taking place on June 30th. Well, I think a key element that we need to look at in terms of how you manage your cohort is your planning. Thinking right now, it's very fresh. You're in the last minutes of trying to resolve delinquencies, get payments in place, get deferments or forbearances taken care of and processed, everything to bring your cohort default rate as low as possible for June 30's measure. But while this is still fresh, this is also the time to be planning and evaluating what you're going to do about your next cohort. Because, again, this is because of the nature of our business. The minute we're done with one population, we're already into the next one. And especially in today's world, we don't take a lot of time to take a step back and evaluate, how did we do this year? A lot of schools that we've talked to have indicated their default rates have been running higher this year. It could be for economic reasons. It could be something that's related to a specific region in the country. There could be a lot of issues. But by not taking time to look at some of the whys and hows your cohort were affected this year, trying to manage your cohort going forward next year and in future years becomes that much harder. So I want to take a little time to talk to you about Temple, also talk to you in terms of some ideas in terms of planning and things that you should be looking at. In terms of how we look at planning and how we manage cohort default rates, we're putting a lot of emphasis on the Perkins loan program today, but the same types of techniques, tools, and skills that you're using for Perkins can easily be applied to other federal loans or institutional loan programs as well. Temple University in Philadelphia has about 38,000 students in Philadelphia at the main campus and at other branch campuses in Pennsylvania and in Rome, Italy. Our Perkins cohort this year consists of just under 2,800 borrowers. As you're planning your cohort management, you're using the tools and techniques that you learn and continue to acquire. Keep in mind that a lot of these techniques are scalable. If you have 120 borrowers in your cohort, if you have 9,000 borrowers in your cohort, the same types of techniques can be utilized. The same tools are available. It's just a matter of how you use them and to what degree. And resources are a big issue in terms of cohort management, particularly human resources. At Temple, we have an associate bursar overseeing our credit and collections unit, and while we have 13 other employees in that division, we have 2 full-time collectors that do nothing but work the Perkins cohort. And you may say, well, I don't have those resources. It's just me. Again, as part of your planning process is looking at what resources you do have. If you're a one-person collection office, you're going to be relying a lot on outsourced partners to help you manage the cohort. If you have staff available to work your accounts, it's how you divide up those responsibilities. You may have 1 or 2 people who have to work both student loans and student accounts. Again, measuring when and how you use those resources, particularly if you're spending part of your time having to deal with Perkins and a cohort population, and then in peaks, in August and in January when you're dealing with students coming back to school and dealing with student account issues, it's building a calendar that really gives you an idea how to manage your staff and when to prioritize various aspects of their jobs, and then utilizing outsourced partners that can help you fill those gaps when you've got other needs pressing inside your offices. We can go to our next slide. From the Temple Owl's perspective, what we look at is we want to talk to students like Gene does as early as possible. And we utilize the resources of our loan servicer. We utilize automated calls where possible. We put emails out there. We also, in tying cohort management to our financial literacy programs, we want to make sure students are aware of our Money Matters website, where they can get information about repaying student loans, information about deferments, forbearance, and also a place where people can link to our loan servicer. So if they have specific informational needs or they're not sure where to send the payment or what to do, they have access to that information up front. Again, as Gene mentioned, doing this earlier, counseling students as much as possible throughout. It's not always possible to see students individually or in small groups, so targeting communications campaigns that you can focus on your students who are ready or scheduled to graduate at a particular time. Number 1, to complete exit interviews. Number 2, if they're not graduating or leaving your institution, to let you know that. One of the last things you want to do is be restricting students from registering for a future semester when you know they're not leaving. That's also a good touch point to remind them they do have a loan. They're going to have to complete an exit interview when they really are graduating, and take a look at your information so you understand what you're borrowing, how much you borrowed, and that may impact some of your other decisions before you do leave the institution. Philosophically at Temple, you can talk about making payments to bring an account current and get the account out of a cohort default rate situation. We like to focus on the term account resolution because, keeping in mind, the goal is to bring the student back into current status, or at least get them under the 240 or 270-day past due threshold. If we have a student who we know is unemployed or underemployed, can't make the monthly payments as scheduled, or can't pay the amount as scheduled, we want to try and get them a forbearance or get them in a deferment. Forbearance gives us an opportunity, in particular because of finances, to obtain a financial statement, really get a snapshot of what their situation is. We can also use that opportunity to help counsel the students on budgeting. Again, referring them back to the Money Matters website for budgeting tips, to think in terms of establishing payment. And again, one of our goals is we can't get the account resolved at that point. We want to get the borrower back into a situation where they're used to making regular on-time payments. If we can get that regular payment pattern in place, a deferment or forbearance at that point to bring the account back into a current status, and having that borrower understand the value and the need for regular payments will eliminate that individual from coming back in later in the process and possibly becoming delinquent again. You can take a philosophy, and Gene talked about consequences. At one time, we would almost talk about a scared straight philosophy, that by not paying, you could have the federal government coming down on you if we had to turn an account back in an assignment process. Certainly credit reporting and what that can do to an individual, especially starting out after college, trying to buy a car or a house. The scared straight philosophy works in some cases, but again, flexibility. If you know your borrowers or understand your population as a whole, there may be other strategies that are better suited to the population. And again, this is where planning comes into play. If you try a scared straight philosophy and you watch your default rate increase in 1 year, you've got to really think twice about going down that same road again. So flexibility also becomes a key. Again, I believe account resolution has an important value here. At June 30th, you're not going to be measured on the dollars you collected out of that cohort. You're going to be measured on a percentage of loans that are in default. And that percentage, as the key performance indicator, is what you're going to be measured on, not just by the federal government, but most likely by your senior leadership. If your default rates are continually going up, questions are going to start to arise, and you're going to have to look at, is it an economic issue or is it just a management issue? Thinking in terms, folks, that you want to be in a situation where you can react quickly as the environment changes. You want to try and have a plan in place. Really, almost like a script on how you're going to manage your portfolio. Think in terms of the resources you have internally, or start externally, utilizing where you do utilize a billing service, looking at the tools and the services that they provide that can assist you with the cohort population, looking at how you can supplement their communications, either by automated calling, by email, or other types of messaging, to keep students advised about when their loans become due. And again, grace period management, their requirements, and then how do you supplement the requirements. If your accounts become delinquent and are headed toward down the road of 240 and 270 days past due, at what point do you bring in your third-party collectors to assist you in that process? As Brandon's going to talk a little bit next about what a collection agency would do with a cohort account as opposed to any other type of debt, knowing at what point, if you're very much attuned to your population, you can make that determination at what point, what point in time do you want to place those accounts. Waiting till an account's 270 days past due to place to a third party may not be advantageous when that takes place in April and you're looking for a measure at June 30. I think, as Gene said before, you really have to react quickly in managing a cohort, because that clock continues to run and you don't get those days back that you think, maybe I'm going to get the payment here, If I wait another week, I was promised. Broken promise once, yeah, maybe you give somebody a second chance. Broken promise twice, you better consider whether or not you're going to have the most success with that or whether you need to outsource that account. In terms of your internal resources, again, I think it's important. Financial aid is a key player here. Financial aid will get students contacting them because these are the people that gave me the loan, and they need to understand, and working with your financial aid office to make sure those borrowers are referred back to you for quick action, or that the financial aid office has specific information about loan servicers, and we're going to direct borrowers if they do have questions or inquiries, utilizing them as an extension of your collection process, in essence. Making sure, too, that your schools and colleges at larger institutions and your academic advisors understand what happens after the student has graduated or stopped out. And again, mostly for a case of where do I refer this individual for immediate action. Think of this, folks, as collections being part of customer service. We want to provide quality service and get the student borrower where they need to be, and they need to be with us to be able to resolve their account ASAP. From an alumni relations or advancement perspective, these cohort borrowers are not going to be giving tons of money to an institution, but they may be participating in alumni-related activities. Try and leverage relationships like that so that there's information going out, little reminders about repaying your student loans, and if you need assistance, here's where you go. Keeping in mind as well that this type of communication, again, this is not an effort to collect the debt. This is an information in case you want to inform people what they need to do and get them to the right place at the right time. In terms of how and when to communicate, again, on the next slide, we give you some of the tools that you can use. Taking advantage, again, this is where scalability is so important. If you're dealing with a 100-borrower cohort, over a short period of time, you'll be able to reach out to every one of those borrowers and try and resolve their accounts much better in some ways. In other ways, you're going to find where your problems are, where you have skips, where you have people that need more assistance. But supplement your efforts with automated calling. Again, if you're a one-person office, an automated call asking people to call you will get some activity moving for you and help you do what you need to get done to resolve delinquencies. Don't hesitate. We talk about old-fashioned methods of communicating. Sometimes snail mail is one of the best ways to do it. Student borrowers, again, are very mobile. Snail mail provides an opportunity if somebody's moved to either get a new address or know for certain that they've moved and that you've got to take some other course of action. And then where possible, take advantage of electronic communication, whether it be email, text, or even any type of social media. Be careful, however. If you're going to communicate electronically, you can't put much specific information in there because of FERPA, FDCPA, and other privacy concerns. The goal, I believe, in using electronic communications is to get the borrower in touch with you. This cannot, it can be a subtle form of collection, but it can't be a very proactive one because too much information in the wrong hands ends up causing you more of a problem. And instead of worrying about managing your cohort, you may be managing some other issues. So again, putting this all together in a planning mode, laying that plan out for the year, having a calendar, having a timeline of events simplifies your processing, helps you manage your time, manage your resources, and develop a model that can help you improve your collections, reduce your default rates, and at the same time have borrowers who will be, I can't say totally happy they have to repay, but are not going to generate complaints and ultimately provide your institution with other types of support after they repaid their debt. With that, I'd like to, Denny, if we have any questions, this might be a good time to take a question or two before we turn this over to Brandon.
Well, actually, there is one for the group that's kind of interesting. It's, as long as this is coming from a school, as long as we have met our due diligence obligations, is there a minimum time we must wait to turn accounts over to an external collection agency?
Well, I would suggest, first of all, if you're saying as long as you've met your due diligence requirements, if you're talking about, 15-day, 45-day past due notification, you're talking about 60-day final demand and then a phone call by 90 days. If you're following due diligence strictly, you may be at 91 days before you're even placing the account. I'd suggest that what you're doing is supplementing due diligence and making additional contacts between the required phone calls, letters, notifications. Try and collect the account. And then you push that 120 may move closer to 90. So you've made your phone, you attempt to contact the borrower by phone. You've either had success or you're prepared to turn that account over fairly quickly.
Great, David. We have another question that what for either you or Gene, what departments assist you or have the potential of assisting you in this effort?
I really think, as both David and I mentioned, your alumni department and also the registrar's office, because again, a lot of times they're updating their contact information so they can get transcripts, or if they're late in getting their diploma, and then alumni is really very good at keeping track of people too, and like I mentioned, some of your colleges, they like to keep tabs on their students to see how they're doing.
Great. There were also a lot of questions about an awful lot of interest about the website for Money Matters, and I think we posted it, so hopefully you all can see. If not, it's very easy. Just do a search and it comes right up. But it's an FTC part of their website, so it's ftc.gov/Money Matters will get you there.
And Denny, if they're referring to what I mentioned about the Temple site, if you go to bursar.temple.edu and you go to the home page there, you can click on the financial literacy site.
Great. Thank you. Well, let's move on to our closer, Brandon from ERS. Brandon.
Thank you, Denny, David, Gene. Appreciate the opportunity to speak today. Those of you that know me, hi. For those of you that don't know, I'm the Director of Operations for ERS Incorporated. Been here for about 14 years, and currently we manage approximately 250 cohort clients. And what I want to do is kind of touch on some of the points that Gene and David made regarding agency relations and customizing a plan for your specific institution and trying to get down to the lowest cohort default rate percentage possible. So the question one, somebody had mentioned out there that what is a good time frame to place with the agency, and as David was saying, as long as you're doing the due diligence requirements, we have a lot of agencies that automate this through their billing servicer at day 105. And that just means they're doing the 90-day due diligence, waiting 15 days, and then placing it with the agency. So if you're using a billing servicer, you can go ahead and set that up where it's automatically set up to ERS and be placed, or with the agency that you're using. So what we like to do here at ERS is customize a plan with our individual clients.
So this strategy that we go forward with is based on our clients' overall needs and expectations, and look at historical data to see what previous year's cohort default rate percentage was and what we could do to improve that. We like to evaluate in July every year as to how we did as an agency. I know David had mentioned that a lot of people feel like they're up on their default rate, and that could be due just to nerves, or, I think we go through this every year on June 30th, but 2011 cohort default rate was at 8.32%, was the national average. That was actually down from 2010, or that was an improvement from 2010. And we'll wait to see how 2012 played out. But I know ERS as an agency is we're up this year in our overall default rate cures. So we like to customize the plan and provide our clients with monthly cohort reports. I know some of the institutions, the universities, do not have the capacity to run their own internal reporting, and that can be a hindrance. And it's something that we have a business intelligence team here that we could help assist you in setting that up and identifying students earlier in the process, because I think a key point here was made that, not only do we have to manage the student population that's currently in the cohort, but who's about to be in the cohort, and getting in touch with them as early as possible. So very, very important stuff there. And what we do is, again, provide monthly reports to our clients, which helps our management team focus on our strategy. Our business intelligence team provide us weekly reports so we know exactly what our cure rate is for each individual client and where we need to pick it up and help you achieve your desired percentage. So on the report, you get things such as what accounts have been cured, pending cures, still actively working, in consolidation, and it helps you get a better idea so you can relay to your staff, how ERS or the agency is doing, and help each other out there. So, and ERS has been doing this for quite some time. This is our 25th year in existence, and colleges and universities is our legacy business. I've helped manage Department of Ed, GA contracts, but I started out in colleges and universities, and it's our legacy business, like I said, and our cohort staff is very tenured, okay? So we have our accounts segregated. We, from Perkins, AR, all the way down to cohorts. So we have a dedicated cohort staff, and the average tenure of our cohort specialists is over 10 years with ERS and many more years in the industry. So very tenured staff. Our turnover rate for our cohort department is practically zero. I can't remember the last time somebody left, and I guess one of the reasons for that would be obviously the collectability of it. We love cohorts, but the important thing about having a tenured staff and a low turnover rate is it helps maintain consistency with the message that we're delivering to the students. It helps us align, the message with the university. If we've been working with X university for years, we know what that message is. We know what that university is requiring out of us. So it helps with the consistency that you guys are delivering to your students and what we're delivering to your students. So, and it helps mitigate complaints. And what we've learned over the years is collections has always been about revenue generation and compliance, right? So there's certain ways to achieve revenue and obviously satisfy our clients' needs at the same time. And our cohort collection specialists have a different compensation plan than other collectors out on the floor because of their requirements. And what we did is align the compensation plan for our cohort specialists with the needs of the clients and the student populations. We implement drivers in our compensation plan to encourage paper cures for clients that prefer that or want that. So they have opportunities to increase the amount of money their earning potential based on the amount of cures as opposed to money collected. So that's one of the major things that we've changed over the years that's helped our our default percentage or cure rate go up.
So our approach as an agency is we customize the approach by client, and we have a general cohort strategy that we implement for all cohorts, but then we break it down specifically to each client based on their needs. ERS is very dedicated to curing as many accounts, and we're paying attention to the Orange Book like some of you are out there, and we know the percentages for our clients and what they did last year and what we need to do this year in order to be in a good spot there. So the collection staff is, again, the most tenured staff, and they go through their progressions quite well with the PIF, paid current, 6 consecutive payments, consolidation, rehabilitation, admin res. That was something that David was pointing out was very important to our client base in the universities. We batch accounts out there for outsourcing, and we identify bankruptcies, death and in-car, things of that, so we could kind of get those accounts and get them cured immediately for you. In addition to some of our outsourcing, the tools that we have, we batch accounts for POE information where we can load that into our system and update it. And one thing that I've kind of noticed over the years was we're dealing with a younger demographic. These people have just left school, either graduated or not graduated, and it's important that we identify the student population from a particular university immediately. So we have reports set up where we could know whether they, for most clients that provide the data, whether they graduated, didn't graduate, their score, basically their collectability score. And what this does is it doesn't help you, it doesn't dissuade our staff from working any particular account. It just helps us go ahead and it helps us identify the accounts that we could skim off the top, get cures for you immediately, as early in the process as possible, and what accounts that we need a little bit deeper digging on through manual skip trace efforts and so forth. We have a very low ACR, which is an account to collector ratio. We'd like to keep that around 250 to 1. So for every 1 collector we have, they are seeing approximately 250 accounts that they're managing. Very important to giving the cohort accounts the level of detail they need, and important to keeping the percentage low. So challenges in the cohort collection process. So one thing that I think can help the process, or the challenges that we have, is not getting all the information from a university or billing servicer upon placement. And we could all probably work a little better to make sure that we keep the line of communication open and kind of help you, help us with providing us with exit interview data, graduate, non-graduate data, last contact, anything that could help drive our effort to contact that student earlier in the process will definitely smooth out the process. So William D. Ford issues. As you know, William D. Ford is a great option for the agencies, and the collectors love that option. However, as the cohort year comes to an end, it becomes a less and less viable option, and which kind of brings me back to the placement of the account. So again, you could contact your billing servicer and set it up with them to have them auto-place accounts. Day 105 is very good. You did your due diligence, and then place it from there. But earlier in the process, when you get it into the hands of an agency to kind of do the lettering for you, the outsourcing, the batching, some of the tools that the universities don't have, we definitely deploy those immediately upon placement. And it helps out when scoring the accounts and identifying. So by compensating the collectors or changing their aligning their compensation with the needs of our clients, we've had a very, very successful year, I think, and I believe in our cure percentage, and I got the analysis to provide that. But one thing is key is any time that we've identified a student that needs an economic hardship forbearance or qualifies for a deferment, we're very diligent about getting that information out to them, because with this student population that we're dealing with now, if I wait 2 days and mail it, a week goes by and they're on a vacation or at their buddy's house, they're out of sight, out of mind. So we try to, within the hour, email that information, password protected, of course, to the borrower and set up a call within that hour for them to if they have any questions or need help filling it out. We got an email address set up called studentloanhelp@ersinc.com. That you could refer your student borrowers to if they have a question or if they need to scan documents to us. So if I'm a student and I get a call and I need an economic hardship forbearance, 99% of us have email addresses, so I could expect an email, fill out the paperwork, scan it back within an hour or two, and we could have that over to our client relations department and in your hands that same day. So it helps expedite the process, and just wanted to touch on that point because I think it's very important that we continue to develop our processes and procedures and what we're doing as an agency to align with the front-end process with the university, because technology is changing the way we do things. So in closing, I guess the takeaways from my presentation would be communication with your students, and agency relations to ensure a consistent message is being conveyed to your students. ERS has professional specialists with a desired tenure of any collection staff. I've never seen it in my life, but over 10 years with ERS alone and many more in the industry. And then customizing a strategy and a plan and kind of talking it through with professionals at an agency. Because you guys are the upfront, and you make our job easier, and we would love to make your job easier by helping you with some of the process, the back-end processes to kind of get out there up front and identifying accounts and the reporting and such. So I don't have much else. I don't know if you want to take it away, Denny.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks a million. In fact, there's a few questions out there that you or Gene or David can provide some guidance, and that's in related to external collection agencies. This is from the school. That how can they work with the agency to provide them with the most up-to-date needed information or assistance for the agency to bring their cohort rate down. You don't sit back and watch a company like ERS just watch the numbers go down. Mm-hmm. I guess is what can schools do to help in the process?
Well, schools could, for one, if you're using a billing servicer, there are options there to set up your due diligence requirements and placement, as well as what information you want to be placed with the agency. The more information is better. We could score accounts for you. We could identify people with higher collection or collectability scores, graduates, and kind of customize our plan to go after these students as effective and efficiently as possible. But the more information, the better, and we could help you. It helps us dissect and reach your students as quickly in the process as possible.
Okay, great. Another question is that this school finds, and I think a lot of schools do, find someone, a Perkins borrower that has defaulted, has also defaulted on Stafford loans as well. Now, they say years ago the direct loans would consolidate the loans. Today, they find that a borrower is forced to rehab the Stafford loans prior to consolidation. For many borrowers, the payments are just way, way too high. Is there a formal policy or process or procedure?
I could take that one.
Sure.
Absolutely. We have a specialized unit, actually, our Perkins collectors, whose sole job is to contact defaulted Perkins loan and work out a program. Obviously, rehabilitation is the Department of Education's #1 priority. However, with the way it's changed even over the past year or so in the CFPB and allowing every option available, I mean, for years, the consolidation option is still available. What we would have to do is contact the student, identify where their other loans are through NSLDS, or have the borrower do that, or even run a credit bureau report to identify that information. And what we would need in order to consolidate the federal Perkins loan is what is called an anchor loan. That would be any of their GSLs or Department of Ed loans, and we could just do the normal William D. Ford consolidation application with whatever your university is and include their other loans, and they'll consolidate the two together. So consolidation, the William D. Ford program is still the #1 option to get defaulted Perkins out of default.
Another question, at what point is the account considered in default? Is it 90 days, 180 days, 6 months? What?
Well, I think there's the definition of for a cohort for purposes of measuring the cohort default rate in the Perkins program. You're looking at 240 days for monthly repayment, 270 days for quarterly repayment. But if you think about when a loan has become delinquent, if somebody fails to make a payment or submit a request for a deferment or forbearance, and that payment was due on June 1st, technically on June 2nd, you could consider that loan to be in default. We tend to use the term delinquency, and when we're talking about cohort management, we're really targeting toward the 240 or 270, not to have the account reach that stage in terms of aging. So I think from the point of view, for purposes of measuring your default rate and how the federal government is going to look at that, you're looking at 240 or 270 days for the Perkins program. But from your own institutional point of view, the day after a payment has not been made or paperwork or any other request for benefit has not been made, you could technically consider that loan to be in default. You won't be measured at June 30th if the account's 30 days past due, let's say. But in terms of, again, this is part of your plan and philosophically, after day one, you really want that borrower to take some action. And if the failure to take action is going to lead to having that person included at the prescribed rate, 240 and 270.
I have another question from a school that since the resources required to do things like sending letters and making phone calls to students is so great, what steps can a school take to attempt to contact students to provide information on delinquency resolution if the school staff is limited? Is outsourcing the only option?
Actually, a lot of campuses have a call blasting or automated call feature on campus already. A lot of times those are your admissions or financial aid departments that do have those. So I would ask around, actually probably start with your IT department and check with them. Do you have the ability to do targeted email messages? Or texting even. A lot of campuses now are doing texting. Maybe perhaps through your portal also you can do targeted message to those particular students if they're still on campus. Maybe they're taking one class here or there, so they go back into repayment. So there's a few things on your campus that start asking around and finding out what other departments are doing to take and contact those students.
And Denny, there's some schools that actually develop formal default management or default aversion plans, and they'll include bringing other units. When I talked earlier about academic advisors or financial aid, they'll assemble a team of people that could be utilized to make calls or answer inquiries. So I think it really depends on how in-depth your institution wants to go and how capable you are of committing internal resources to take a lot of these actions. But to me, if you're shorthanded, if you have limited human resources, outsourcing is probably the least expensive and most efficient way to go. It may not be as personal in some regards, or you could outsource in terms of a contact center where people would you would be paying for the service, but have people make the calls and have personal calls as an extension of your own operation. Again, a lot of this depends on human resources and how far you go within the institution. Outsourcing, depending on how much you want to spend or can spend.
A few other questions. Thank you, David. Is it still 6 months in which Perkins loan can be added on to a consolidation?
What we do is we like to combine we do it up front. So from the beginning, we identify the anchor loan and send the application out to the borrower. And as they're viewing the loan listing page, you would see the university and the anchor loan being the GSL or direct loan. But if a consolidation happens to fund without a Perkins loan, then you have up to 180 days to add it on. Or if it's past 180 days, all you really have to do is just reconsolidate with the direct loan being the anchor loan. Right. So you can still get them on as long as they have an existing consolidation.
Now, there's also been a lot of questions about, can people get a copy, a handout copy of the slides? So is there a time frame for that?
Yeah, so tomorrow afternoon, we'll make available all the slides will be available with the audio, just like as you're seeing it now. So the full presentation, video and audio will be available on our website tomorrow afternoon. I'll send out an email blast to everyone that attended today with a link to the video library where that'll be warehoused. You'll see today's webinar, and you also see the webinars from earlier in the year and from last year as well. So this is webinar 2. Cohort management, that's the one you want to click on. And like I said, you'll get all the slides, you'll get all the audio associated with today's presentation.
And Steve, I believe too, schools that have requested multiple copies, they have that ability to print off as many as they need for their own use within their school.
Oh, correct, absolutely. No restrictions there.
There was an early question. It seems that a school has a student on their list that is tagged with their OPID number, but the student is attending a different university. So, but he's still tagged with the OPID for the old school. How does a school start the process to get something like that fixed?
Well, Denny, I think I'm not sure how that would have happened or where that's originating, whether that's an NSLDS issue or if there's some other situation that's caused that. I would probably place a call to my Department of Ed regional office first and seek some guidance on where I need to go to resolve that. I mean, I have to be honest, I've not had that situation come up before. So I would probably start with the regional office for some direction. And more importantly, who is the other school? I mean, if it's a bad number, I'm not sure how that would have happened. It sounds like a systemic issue, but you're probably overstate. What's going to happen is you're probably going to either overstate or understate what your default rate is at year end. Likewise, the other institution is going to be in a similar situation, and it's probably harder to resolve. And I know it's very late in the process to try and get a fix on that. So for the person to ask the question, I'd probably try and get to your regional office today, tomorrow morning at the latest, see if there's any if you can get some guidance, and then also ask the question, what happens for this particular cohort. If you're going to have to file any additional work, when you do your FISAP, whether you're going to have to do any additional work, because again, you'll see some of the measures come out because of the FISAP reporting.
And one last, thank you, David. One last question. Somebody wanted to know if we could talk a little bit about total and permanent disability. Now, I understand that in the LMS listserv, there's been an extreme amount of activity in the last day and a half about the issue.
I would suggest, again, we could probably spend another webinar just on the topic of total and permanent disability. I think right now the billing service, if you're using a billing service, they've been a great resources in terms of information going out to their clients on what the new process is going to be effective July 1. I'd start in that direction to get some guidance. And then I think what you're going to find is there'll be more activity on both the LMS and the Bursar listservs in the next couple of weeks as cases start to come forward and more questions arise. But I think for today's purposes, I would start with your billing service for some guidance. Also take a look at the IFAP website from the Department of Education, ifap.ed.gov. And the IFAP site should provide the regulations as well as some more specific guidance. Whatever guidance the department has put out, you would find at that site. Okay.
Thanks a lot. I think that we're close to concluding this second webinar of the series. So I'd like to turn this over to Steve.
Okay, well, yeah, great. I thought it was a great webinar. I really appreciate the presenters and Mr. Retired Vice Chancellor of University of Pittsburgh. Thank you for facilitating today's event. As I mentioned before, we're going to have the webinar, the video, the audio available tomorrow afternoon. You'll be able to print out if you just want the slides, if you want to be able to listen to see the video with the recording. You'll be able to click on the link and you'll be able to see all that and hear all that. And want to thank everyone that attended today. We had a really good turnout for today's webinar, so thank you. And like I said, we have not determined our topic for the next webinar, so feel free to email me with any of your suggestions. I'll be glad to take a look at them. Also, you have emails up on the screen there for Gene, David, and Brandon. If you have any questions, they're more than willing to help you out. So feel free to email any of today's presenters, and I'm sure they'll get back to you pretty quickly. So with that being said, thank you very much, and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.